Serena Williams just broke her silence, and what she revealed will shake professional tennis to its core. The legend didn't hold back. She exposed what insiders have whispered about for years. Eala's rise wasn't just meteoric, it was manufactured. This is the reckoning that changes everything. Eala entered the professional circuit like a comet, blazing, untouchable, destined. The media crowned her immediately. Sponsorships flooded in before she'd earned her first Grand Slam point. She was marketed as tennis's next global phenomenon, the face of a new generation, the chosen one the WTA had been desperately seeking. But here's what nobody discussed openly. Her ascent defied conventional pathways. Players who'd climbed the rankings through brutal tournaments, heartbreaking losses, and decades of obscurity watched Eala vault past them with unprecedented protection. Her opponents faced suspiciously favorable draw placements. Her matches received prime scheduling. When she lost, rarely, journalists framed defeats as learning experiences rather than failures. Sponsors treated her differently than established champions. Clothing brands designed lines around her before she'd proven consistency. Airlines offered endorsement deals. She became iconic before she'd accomplished anything historic. Younger players noticed. Veteran competitors questioned it silently, but speaking out meant career suicide in a sport controlled by one governing body. The WTA held all the power: wildcards for tournaments, ranking point distribution, media exposure decisions. Criticizing the system meant exile. Eala never asked for this treatment. Born into privilege, mentored by connected figures, she simply accepted what was offered. She played the game the way the institution had designed it. But beneath her polished interviews and graceful victories, something festered. A growing resentment from players who recognized the unfairness, yet remained powerless against it. They suffered in silence until Serena Williams, the greatest player alive, decided silence was complicity. The interview happened without warning. Serena Williams sat down with a journalist, and when asked about the current WTA landscape, she didn't deflect. She didn't choose diplomatic language. She went directly for the jugular. "The system is rigged," she declared, her voice steady and uncompromising, "and everyone pretending otherwise is lying to themselves." She specifically addressed Eala's trajectory. A young talent deserves opportunity, absolutely, but what we're witnessing isn't opportunity, it's favoritism manufactured by a governing body that chose a player and decided everyone else would adjust around her. That's not competition, that's propaganda. Serena continued, her words cutting deeper. "I've played against the best for 25 years. I recognize excellence instantly, but I also recognize when the game is being manipulated. Players are being punished for speaking truth. Journalists are being silenced. Sponsors are being pressured. This isn't sport anymore. It's theater with predetermined outcomes." The statement rippled instantly. Serena didn't accuse Eala of cheating. She indicted the entire institutional apparatus protecting her. She revealed systematic inequality. Certain players received better seeding, more favorable conditions, lighter schedules, and media narratives designed to build mythology rather than report facts. These younger players deserve an honest arena, not one where their trajectory is predetermined by boardroom decisions. That's not legacy, that's corruption wearing a tennis dress. Her words weren't allegations, they were weapons, and they detonated across the tennis world with devastating precision, shattering the carefully constructed narrative that everyone had accepted for years. The question nobody dared ask became unavoidable. If Serena, untouchable, legendary, beyond criticism, was willing to destroy her relationship with the WTA by speaking this truth, what else was being hidden? Serena's statement cracked the dam. Suddenly, other voices emerged from the shadows. Coaches, agents, rival players who'd witnessed the machinery firsthand but lacked her platform to challenge it. A double specialist revealed being denied tournament access after questioning draw assignments. A former qualifier disclosed how her ranking points were mysteriously adjusted after she defeated a WTA-favored competitor. Coaching staff documented preferential treatment in practice facility access, equipment allocation, and medical staff availability. The pattern became undeniable. The WTA operated a two-tiered system. Anointed prospects received infrastructure designed for championship success. Everyone else fought for scraps within a deliberately handicapped structure. Tournament directors confirmed pressure from the WTA headquarters regarding draw placements. Journalists admitted receiving directives about coverage priorities. Sponsors described being encouraged, sometimes coerced, into specific endorsement partnerships aligned with institutional preferences. One broadcast analyst, speaking anonymously, detailed how editorial standards shifted based on the player being covered. "We were instructed to frame Eala's matches differently," the source explained. Losses became unexpected obstacles rather than defeats. Victories were destiny manifesting. Simultaneously, competitors facing identical situations were portrayed as falling short of championship potential. The WTA had weaponized narrative infrastructure. They controlled ranking calculations, tournament scheduling, media narratives, and sponsorship flows, essentially every variable determining a player's visibility and financial viability. Younger players recognized this architecture. Some accepted their secondary status, others attempted rebellion, only to discover that challenging the system meant being buried, removed from prime tournament slots, excluded from exhibitions, starved of sponsorship opportunities. The sport hadn't evolved, it had regressed into institutional corruption, masked by glamorous aesthetics and carefully curated imagery. But Eala's team wasn't staying silent. They were preparing their counterattack, and it would be devastatingly personal. Social media ignited into chaos. Hashtags trended within minutes. Fan accounts weaponized Serena's accusations, creating compilations of Eala's suspicious victories and favorable circumstances. Reddit threads multiplied, dissecting every tournament draw, every scheduling decision, every sponsorship announcement, as evidence of institutional favoritism. Then Eala herself responded, not with defensive justifications, but with controlled devastation. She didn't deny the system's existence. Instead, she reframed it. "I didn't create these circumstances. I was a young player offered opportunities. Should I have rejected advancement? The issue isn't with me. It's with blaming me for institutional decisions I didn't control." Her statement was brilliantly crafted. It acknowledged the system while repositioning Eala as another victim rather than a beneficiary. Suddenly, narrative ownership shifted. Sympathetic outlets began portraying her as a scapegoat for WTA corruption, a young athlete weaponized by a governing body pursuing its own agenda. Players fractured into factions. Established stars sided with Serena, recognizing decades of accumulated institutional injustice. Younger competitors, many benefiting from the same systems, publicly defended Eala or remained strategically silent. The WTA issued a statement denying systematic favoritism, citing transparent protocols and fair distribution processes, language that fooled nobody familiar with institutional corruption. But they also quietly began distancing themselves from Eala, sensing her toxic status threatening organizational credibility. Sponsors faced impossible decisions: abandon Eala and appear complicit in institutional corruption, or maintain partnerships and face public accusations of supporting unfairness. Major brands paused collaborations, released terse evaluation statements, and essentially ghosted her in real time. Within 72 hours, Eala transformed from golden child to controversial figure. The system that manufactured her ascent now required her sacrifice for institutional preservation. The truth emerging wasn't about one player's unfairness, it was about an entire sport's structural dishonesty, and everyone finally had to acknowledge it. Serena's intervention forced a reckoning the WTA couldn't suppress. Congressional interest sparked, journalists launched investigations into ranking calculations, draw placements, and financial distributions. Players' unions demanded institutional reforms and transparency audits. The aftermath restructured professional women's tennis fundamentally. Prize distributions became publicly calculated. Tournament draws faced external oversight. Ranking algorithms underwent independent review. Media coverage guidelines shifted towards standardized reporting frameworks. But the human cost remained devastating. Eala's career, once seemingly inevitable as a generational legacy, became defined by institutional scandal rather than championship accomplishments. She'd become the visible embodiment of systemic corruption, unfairly scapegoated while the architects remained largely protected. Serena's intervention sparked philosophical questions about complicity, institutional courage, and generational responsibility. Some celebrated her intervention as moral clarity. Others questioned whether sacrificing Eala's reputation, however inevitable her visibility made her, truly served justice or simply perpetuated a different form of institutional violence. Women's tennis evolved. The governance transformed, transparency increased, yet lingering suspicion persisted, wondering whether new systems simply concealed favoritism differently or genuinely eliminated it. For Eala, the aftermath meant rebuilding identities separate from institutional mythology. She'd need to prove her excellence existed independently of the system that created her, a burden no young athlete should carry. Yet perhaps through that crucible, she'd discover authentic competitive identity, stripped of manufactured narratives and artificial elevation. The question haunting the sport remains: was this systemic reckoning worth the sacrifice of a young player caught between institutional forces beyond her control? And did exposing corruption truly require destroying individuals, or could sports reform achieve justice without devastating human casualties? Tennis changed that week, but at what cost? And will we remember Eala's contribution to that change, or only the controversy that defined her? The tennis world will never be the same. Serena Williams didn't just expose institutional corruption, she forced an entire sport to examine its foundations. Eala's rise, once celebrated as destiny, became historically defined as the catalyst for systemic reform. Winners and casualties emerged from the same event, depending on your perspective. What matters now is whether these revelations stick, whether the WTA maintains genuine transparency or simply becomes more sophisticated at concealing favoritism. The players sacrificed for speaking truth, the institution was forced to evolve, tennis spectators gained clarity about mechanics they'd unknowingly been supporting. This is the story the sport didn't want exposed, but exposure, once achieved, becomes impossible to reclaim. If you believe institutional accountability matters, if you think sports should reward genuine excellence rather than manufactured narratives, subscribe for stories the gatekeepers prefer remaining buried. We document the scandals, controversies, and human dramas reshaping professional athletics. The tennis world tried silencing these conversations. Let's ensure they remain permanently visible. Hit that subscribe button, enable notifications, join a community demanding truth over mythology.